recorded and sent to you all post-session. So welcome to the New York Women's Foundation's New York City Fund for Girls and Young Women of Color information session for our new cycle. Welcome and happy Monday. We're going to get started with some introductions. My name is Kimberly. I am a program officer with the New York Women's Foundation, and I use she, her pronouns. I'm joining you all today from our office in Manhattan on the ancestral homelands of the Munsee Lenape people. And as we move forward together this morning in community, it's important to be grounded with each other as we're discussing how to do grant making for liberation and transformation through redistribution. So in the spirit of moving together in community, I'm going to pass it to my colleague to introduce herself. Go ahead, Dana.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Dana Huber, and I use she, her pronouns. I'm the Director of Programs and Strategic Learning at the New York Women's Foundation. Thrilled to be in space with you all today. Over to you, Gisela.
Good morning, everyone. So happy to be in the space with you. My name is Gisela Marroquin. My pronouns are she, her, hers, ella, and I am super excited to be here. I am the Senior Director of Programs for the New York Women's Foundation. I'll pass it over to my other colleague, Marissa.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. My name is Marissa Crawford. I'm the Director of Grants and Operations here at the Foundation, and very excited to welcome you to this space and get you all set up for success in this application process.
Thanks, Marissa. So feel free to introduce yourselves, where you're coming from, pronouns that you feel comfortable with sharing with us in the chat. We are going to be keeping folks on mute and off camera today so that we can get you all the information that will feel fruitful for your process. We do have a full agenda today, but hopefully it will feel generative for you all as you're engaging. We'll start with a little bit of background about us and specifically the Fund for Girls and Young Women of Color. And we'll talk a little bit more then about this specific funding opportunity and some of our strategies and priorities going into this specific cycle. And then we'll talk a little bit more about our approach to grant making, specifically participatory grant making, and get into some of the transformation work and redistribution approach that I mentioned earlier. And that will make sure that we go through some important dates and specific details that are going to be really important for you all to keep in mind as you're preparing your proposals and trying to keep up to date with everything so that we receive everything that you need us to receive to get a good idea of the work that you're proposing. And we'll talk a little bit more about how specifically to apply and the process, which can feel overwhelming, but hopefully will feel less overwhelming after engaging in the session. And then we'll have time for a question and answer period. Hopefully this session will answer a lot of the questions that you have. So if you prefer to hold questions until the end, feel free to do that. But I'll be monitoring the chat throughout the session. So if there are kind of burning questions that are coming up for you or things that feel really timely, feel free to put those in the chat and I'll record them. And then our folks will address them at the end of our session. And as I mentioned earlier, for new folks who are joining us, everything that we go through today, all of the materials, the recording of this session will be sent out to all participants after the session. So try to focus on being present and receiving all of the information. Try not to stress too much about recording everything as we're going through it. So as I mentioned earlier, we're here today to talk about the Fund for Girls and Young Women of Color. And this fund envisions a city that offers an opportunity for all girls and young women, trans inclusive, and gender expansive young folks to succeed economically and socially. And what that work looks like is us working really hard in community with you all to pull money together and invest in nonprofit efforts that promote the well-being and leadership of these young folks as change agents and leaders and active partners in the work with communities and other allies, including yourselves, to advance equity. And ultimately, our goal with this fund and of our collective is to shift philanthropic practices by practicing and increasing sustained investment for these young folks, and by sharing knowledge and doing so in a way that feels like we're informing and sustaining effective strategies and approaches to this kind of philanthropic work. During our first 7 years with the fund granted $10 million to 60 organizations. That is a big deal. Just pausing to make space for all of that. And we're hoping to move forward in a way that is going to show up to the next 7 years and what those next 7 years will look like for the young folks who will hopefully be positively impacted by this fund. And we're hoping to do that in community with many of you.
Thank you, Kimberly. Wanted to talk a little bit about what the future holds as we move into phase 2 of the fund. Something that we learned through the first 7 years was a lot happened. The pandemic, Trump's presidency, there was so much that really impacted the lives of young people. And so something that really rose to the surface from conversations that we had with our grantee partners was that the mental health of youth, girls and gender expansive youth of color, was that mental health was critical and at the forefront of folks' experience. Isolation and other critical issues were something that people were experiencing. And so this was really an issue that was at top of mind for our grantee partners. And so for phase 2, the focus for this initial round of grantees will be on focusing on the mental health and emotional well-being of young people and thinking about how organizations can address the key systemic issues that affect mental health. We're interested in learning more about innovative ideas that support the mental health and emotional well-being of young people, as well as programming that has been done for quite a while and is essentially tried and true. And so we're eager to learn all about the different ideas and ways that you're supporting youth and their mental health. We're also really eager to support organizations led by and for young women and gender expansive youth of color that actively engage in youth decision-making at all levels. Having a pipeline for leadership is something critically important so that youth are at the forefront of all of the organization's activities. As noted, we're really eager to hear about the importance of mental health and how the work that you do addresses systems issues that really impact youth mental health outcomes and social and emotional well-being. And of course, we're really critically interested in how engaging girls, young women, and gender expansive youth around mental health and emotional well-being is a critical cornerstone to your program.
Thank you, Dana. This is Gisela speaking, and I am talking about an area that is found in your grant guidelines where you see priority communities named, and these bullet points identify communities that are often underinvested or not invested or visible at all to the philanthropic sector. And so they become really important for us to elevate throughout the review of the proposals that are being submitted for this cycle. So as you can see, when we say young people, we mean folks within the 12 to 25 range. And I just want to clarify that it doesn't mean that those who might be serving folks up to age 30, don't qualify. You would be considered, but we would actually we would be looking at the full scope of all of the services that you provide that also target this particular age range. Folks with lived experience with mental health issues, as Dana was describing, folks who are experiencing homelessness or unstable housing, youth with disabilities, immigrant youth and refugees, LGBTQ community members, and Native and Indigenous individuals, again, within the age range that we are naming here. Next slide. So for this funding opportunity, organizations are eligible to apply for an $80,000 one-year grant. We encourage all to submit your proposals for the general operating support if that is how most of your work aligns. And according to all of the grant guidelines, that there's alignment there as well as with the geographic and strategic priorities that we're listing. If most of your organization's work extends beyond the geographic or strategic priorities, please apply for the program support of your organization's aligned program. So an example of that is that we have had in the past organizations who are national and have a New York chapter or a New York City chapter. And so they choose for their own accounting and keeping track of to submit a proposal that is program specific or program support. As well as maybe the mental health aspect or the alignment with the grant guidelines is in your New York City office, then we would again say program support. Now with that, it means, you know, you're being specific to the geographical area, the work that you that is aligned with our grant guidelines. However, also know that we are not restrictive in that we would need a line by line item. It's still general operating within that scope. So we try to be as much hands off as possible to see you do the work. So if the alignment exists, we trust that you will be spending that funding to support that alignment, and again, within the geographical area that we're working in. So folks who are applying should be a 501c3 or fiscally sponsored by another 501c3. Any other restrictions are just they may not, our funds may not be used for lobbying activities, and the grant year is starting January 1st, 2024 through December 31st, 2024. So while this cycle has kicked off pretty early, there are different pieces of it that you'll see happen as proposals come in, then review of proposals, site visits for the groups that move on to that stage, and then final recommendations. So it is kind of a lengthy process, and we hope that through this info session, you are able to see the alignment, ask your questions, and you know, sort of save yourself time if there is no alignment, and maybe there will be another opportunity where you can apply, so that, you know, it's we don't want to be a burden to you all if it's not necessary. So we hope to be able to answer any of your questions around the grant guidelines and your alignment today. Another aspect of this cycle is that we at the New York Women's Foundation are really rooted in the principles of inclusiveness and empowerment. So we utilize a participatory grant making model that fosters a cross-cultural alliance of stakeholders and lends transparency for the funding process. We want to include community members in the process of thinking about the groups that will be the cohort for this open cycle. So we invite a diverse group of young women and gender expansive people with very professional and life experiences to join as volunteers for the youth grants advisory committee, right? With the guidance of our program staff. The GAC, as we affectionately call them, reviews the proposals, supports our site visits, and makes recommendations for funding to our board of directors who do the final approvals. All applicants to move to the site visit stage will engage with the GAC members during their site visit, and they will be essentially building out our questions, reading through the proposals, and identifying that alignment that we're talking about through our grant, from our grant guidelines. So it is really a community effort here, both with folks from community and our own participation in this process as guiding through what to look for in the alignment of our grant guidelines and our values here at the foundation.
Thank you, Gisela. So I hope that from the information that my colleagues have shared, you see alignment with your work, you're excited, or maybe it's not the right opportunity for you. But if it is, we hope that you will apply and we will have the opportunity to learn more about your work. This section is really to support you all in the technical side of applying. We do accept applications in our Flux grants management system. For our current grantees, you've seen it before, but this process is a little different. And for new grantees, or I'm sorry, new applicants who are looking to enter the system for the first time, you will need to register an account. We do encourage you all to sign in early. So that's log into the system, get your credentials registered. That happens manually. And so if you go into the system and submit for a registration, it may be a day or two until you receive credentials. So that's just another thing that we want to flag and make sure that you're all set up for success as early as possible. Flux does generate credentials automatically. And so that's another thing that I do want to flag when you're applying and working in the system, is that you may get auto-generated emails from Flux. And so if you're not seeing something come through, if you do a search for Flux, that might also be helpful if you're expecting your credentials. So as a reminder, the deadline to apply in the system is July 17th. Next slide, please. So once you are ready to apply, this is what the landing page will look like. You can either on the left side log in now with the credentials that you already have, or you can see on the right side, there's an arrow that points towards that create an account now. And so that's where you would go to if you need to set yourself up with new credentials. If you have a team member who already has credentials, you can use them. However, I do encourage you all, if you're going to be in the system, to create your own account so that everybody on your team that needs access has access to the proposal materials throughout the application process. Next slide. Once you've entered the system, you've got your credentials, you're all logged in. The first space that you're going to want to pay attention to is over on the left-hand side, My Organization. So for our current grantee partners and for new applicants, this area is a section that we've recently redone to collect more robust data about your organization as well as your work and beneficiaries. So we do want to highlight that this is a required element of your application, and we deeply appreciate your time to fully review. It's going to ask about your address, your tax ID number, but again, also that demographic information. And we do want to prepare you for that we are asking these questions. However, we only ask that you submit information for data that you already collect for your organization. There's always the option to select that you're not sure or that you would prefer not to respond, but we're hoping to understand your organization and your work fully as we consider all of the applicants that are coming through the system. So please do take a moment to review your organizational profile. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is the section where you're actually going to open the particular funding application for this cycle. There's a section on the left-hand side that says Open Funding Opportunities. So when you go ahead and click on that, it will open up this page where you'll see New GUIWAC Request. So once you click that, it's going to pop out into an application form that you can work on, complete at that time. We encourage you to save throughout the process. It is a system, glitches do happen, so please save your work often. And the other thing I want to flag is you can save it and continue to work. You can save and close. Once you save and close, it's going to close out the application and it will move then towards draft requests on the left-hand side again. You don't need to continue to open up a new GUIWAC request. You will be able to continue to work on that same application at a later time whenever you're ready to. Next slide, please. So the application is long. We are requesting a good amount of information. We want to get to know you and your work in depth and to the point of our participatory approach. We want our GAC members as well, our participatory review committee, to know and understand you well. Also, they are brilliant individuals who have different experiences and may be encountering your work and the areas of work that you focus on for the first time. And so you'll see that we ask a lot about your mission, the focus, your board, how you all interact as an organization. And that's for us and also for our participatory review committee to get to know you and your work and this field more deeply. So we do ask that you complete the full application, and again, save often, save and close to return to it later. Next slide, please, Dana. Thanks so much. Okay, so this is the final section of the application is the request documents. You'll see there's a lot of details in there. One thing I want to highlight is please use the grant guidelines that you're responding to ensure that you're uploading the correct required materials that you need for this cycle. We don't want you to include information that isn't necessary. You can. We have space for you to include optional documents, but please refer to the grant guidelines to review which materials are required. You'll see it's a little cut off at the bottom, apologies, but there are links that you can click on that'll pop up and you can drag and drop or upload from your computer and save, and then you'll see it load to the file. And if you have any questions about any documents uploading, the first thing I'll say is refresh. Flux can be a little slow. If you have any questions around what's landed or not, the refresh is the first thing to check, and then I'm always here as well if you have any questions. Next slide. All right, you've done all of the work. You have completed your organizational profile, the application form, and upload those required materials. Save and close, and then on the lower right-hand side, you'll see that opportunity to submit. Once you submit, it may take a moment again for Flux to register that it's submitted. We recommend that you refresh. I'm always here if you have a question around whether or not submitted. I'll always check in with organizations that have opened an application, but it's not yet complete, just to check in if support is needed. So please know that that dialogue is open around this application process. And once you do submit, you aren't able to edit the application anymore. So that's another element that if you accidentally submitted and you weren't ready, please do check in with us and we can always roll it back and support you through that process. All right. One other piece of the Flux system that we do want to highlight is that it can translate through Google Translate. Again, it's Google, so we can't always guarantee the accuracy, but if you do need to move the application into another language, you can do so by selecting language on the lower left-hand side of that bar, and then it'll pop open all of the languages that Google translates in. You'll have the opportunity to utilize. Next slide. Thanks so much. Okay, just a reminder on those important dates. Again, Monday, July 17th at 11:59 is when we ask that you submit your application in the Flux system. You'll hear from us again in mid-August on that decision of whether or not your organization will move forward to the site visit stage. Site visits are scheduled to take place throughout October. We do ask that you hold the times 10 a.m. and 3 p.m. on those 3 dates because it is a participatory process and there's many applicant organizations as well as review committee members and staff. It takes a lot of scheduling. We want to work through this as efficiently as possible and be respectful of your time and everyone, all of the stakeholders engaged in the process. So we will aim to share that information with you as soon as possible, but it is very important that you keep those time slots for a potential site visit on those days. The funding decision happens after our board meeting in December, and so we aim to share with you all decisions on whether your organization will be funded on December 11th. And then the grant period, as Gisela noted, begins January 1st to December 31st, 2024. With that, I will turn it back to my colleague, Kimberly, for questions.
Thank you, Marissa. So again, all of the materials from today, including this recording, will be sent out to all of you post-session. I'm going to go through some of the questions that we received in the Q&A box in the Zoom. If questions come up as you're hearing folks answer them, please do either add them into the Q&A section or in the chat, and I'll read them out for you. So first, we have a question from an organization who received a phase 1 grant with GuyWalk, and they're wondering if they'd still be qualified for applying for phase 2 after receiving phase 1.
I could answer that for us. Yes, you are encouraged, if there's alignment, to submit your application. I think that in a competitive cycle, I will also note that we do look to whether an organization has been previously funded, and if things are really tight, we might not have a large cohort within the new set of groups that have been previously funded, but definitely considered. And the more alignment there is of an organization with the grant guidelines, the more likely you are to be in that set of groups that will be ultimately funded. As we mentioned, the Grants Advisory Committee is coming in to support the recommendations. So while we will share if an organization was previously funded, they ultimately also are just looking for that alignment.
Thanks, Gisela. So our next question is about site visits. And if the organization works out of a public school, so they don't have an office space, but instead push into schools to facilitate workshops there, how would site visits work? Would they come to the school, or would it be a one-on-one conversation with the orgs team?
I can start, and maybe Marissa, if you want to just like clarify some of the accommodations. We are making this cycle sort of a hybrid model in which folks can choose to have a virtual or an in-person site visit. We understand that groups work in a variety of settings, and so if it is a little bit complicated, or just the logistics of being able to do an in-person site visit at a location are a little complicated, then we can make our office space available for some of the members and representatives of your organization, or we can also accommodate the virtual setting.
Thanks, Gisela. And I'll just add that you'll have the opportunity to share that information with us in your application. On the Flux form, it asks whether you're able to host an in-person site visit, a virtual site visit, or a site visit at New York Women's Foundation offices. We do open up our space to welcome applicants as well. And again, it's the logistics. We try and be as accommodating and flexible as possible. And that will be one, if your organization is selected for a site visit, we'll work through those logistics on a one-on-one basis in that sort of period after August 15th before the site visits start.
Thanks, Marissa. The next question is around organizations that maybe have been a part of another New York Women's Foundation fund. So if an organization recently completed a multi-year grant cycle with another foundation fund, are they still eligible to apply for the fund for girls and young women of color?
Yes, organizations can apply to multiple strategies here at the New York Women's Foundation. Again, we stress the alignment of the grant guidelines. So if the opportunity is really aligned with the work that you're doing, you are free to apply to multiple strategies, and whether you're in a current other strategy or have been formerly in another strategy, that is fine.
Next question is around budget. Is there a budgetary requirement for this fund?
Great question. I don't know if you were going to take it, Dana. I'm sorry. I just kind of jumped in.
Sure. No, there's not. I think to Gisela's note earlier about program support versus general operating support, if you do have a specific program focused on an area that aligns closely with the grant guidelines, then consider applying for that. But no, at this time, there is not a budgetary cap. That said, we do prioritize emerging and grassroots organizations in all of our work, and so do keep that in mind.
Thanks, Dana. So for folks and organizations who need to submit the application for approval by their fiscal sponsors, is it possible to download their completed application before submitting it?
Great question. So I'll share that typically in our Flux system, it's the fiscally sponsored project that usually submits the application, but of course that depends on the relationship that you have with your fiscal sponsor. I can, with the materials from this session, send a sort of test copy of what the application looks like. I will flag though, we will want the organization information from you as the fiscally sponsored project for that area of work. So we do ask that you as a fiscally sponsored project still register in the system. You'll see when you log in, again, you have that My Organization that you'll complete as you, the fiscally sponsored project. And then when you toggle over to the application and open that, you'll complete it as the project, and you'll have the opportunity to include the information for your fiscal sponsor. But if you have any questions on how you should apply based on a model of fiscal sponsorship that doesn't necessarily align with how our system is designed, please do check in with me, and we can work through that. But I'll share a test application with the materials as well.
Thanks, Marissa. So would we mind elaborating a little bit more on the economic justice pillar of our priorities as listed on our website, and maybe add a little more clarity and context for how this is a focus for this grant period or grant cycle?
Sure, I can kick us off. So our website does list our core areas that we fund, that being economic justice and security, reproductive health and health access, and our safety and healing work. And I think that all of the other initiatives or other strategies that become available for funding sort of stem from those. And the priorities for each of these individual strategies are sometimes not exactly under the economic justice or each of those core areas. There's a connection because all of our work is intersectional, but for this particular opportunity, it really is a focus on what is listed in the grant guidelines, what are the areas and core values that the fund has identified, both in its first phase and in the second phase. So the economic justice piece might not be the area that is prioritized this cycle. It might happen in future years as we, sort of take on this 7-year phase 2. But for this one, we like to just point to the grant guidelines for alignment.
Thank you for that context, Gisela. Are we able to share information at this time about how many grants will be made during this phase?
Marissa, you want to take that? Or Dana?
Sure, yeah. We anticipate having a cohort of around 12 to 15 grantees in this cycle. And for sort of context, when we have open cycles, we typically receive over 100 applications. So it is very competitive. We don't want to discourage you from applying, but just to sort of give a sense of the volume of applications. And with this being the first time we're doing an open call in so long, we also do anticipate this being a very competitive cycle.
Thank you for that context, Marissa. Are programs in the pilot phase eligible?
Yes.
And the next question is, as a GOS grant, what budget form is required?
No required budget form. We ask you to submit in your own format. We don't provide a template for you to submit your organizational budget. We'd like to see for your current fiscal year for 2023, but we know sometimes organizations operate either on the July 1 or annual calendar year, and we'd also like to see 2024 your next fiscal year as well, but it can be in your own format. Nothing required that you need to download from us for your org budget.
The next question is around logistics and grantees. If the organization is national and based in New Jersey, but serves young people in New York City, are they still eligible to apply?
So I would say that that kind of organization would have to be really clear in the proposal the impact and how much of the work actually does impact New York City. Just again, the cycle is very competitive. And so sometimes these multi-layered pieces of how an organization runs their programs could be difficult for volunteers who are supporting this work and the review of proposals to understand. So the clearer you can be about the impact and the amount of programs or how much programming is happening in New York City, the better for us to consider the application. But again, if you just want to check in before you submit your proposal, feel free to reach out. We can maybe do a 15-minute call to clarify how that works and if it is an application you should spend your time with.
Thanks, Gisela. And can we describe a little bit more what kind of organizations this fund is looking to fund? So for example, young versus established, minority run versus other, mission and focus of the organization.
Dana, you want to take that?
I can start us off. One thing that we're really uplifting is buy-in for young people, and particularly young people of color. And so we were really interested, as you'll note in the grant guidelines, for organizations that fit that description. And then the other piece, as noted in alignment, is focused on mental health and areas that organizations are supporting young people related to mental health and emotional well-being. In terms of organization size and the like, again, we prioritize emerging and grassroots organizations, but other types of organizations with specific programming are welcome to apply.
Thanks, Dana. This is a good segue because the next question is also kind of about newer organizations and grassroots organizations. So for those kinds of organizations that are still doing really great work with young folks, can they write a proposal for curriculum programming and SEL intentions?
I think I would need a little more clarity on the pieces, the technical piece and SEL. So I don't know if that person can sort of expand on the question. Sorry.
They also share that they do Zoom and face-to-face work, if that's helpful at all. But yeah, if you want to share a little bit more in the chat or do a follow-up question, maybe, then I can return to your question. So the next question is, I'm reading as I am interpreting. So if this person is wondering if the organization would have a good idea of if they were going to be funded during the site visits to prepare for the implementation of the grant prior to the application decision date in December. So it sounds like they're looking for whether or not they'll be given some kind of direction or indication as to what their chances are of being funded ahead of the site visit or around that time.
Yes, the process is in order to be able to consider all of the organizations. Our GAC members, as well as our staff, are doing site visits and not essentially like the same team is not visiting all of the organizations. So there is, a time where we sort of come together and debrief together these site visits. So there isn't a communication to the organizations as they're doing both, as the review of proposals is happening or during the site visits. We really, once you are moved to the site visit and on the calendar, we've outlined when you will hear from us around whether you move on to the next stage. I would say that those are the only touch points. There aren't other touch points where we're sort of like, well, stay, sort of hopeful. We really wouldn't be able to do that in an equitable manner for the amount of organizations that are applying. So you hear from us to indicate whether you move from one stage to the next. And then after a site visit, it would be for until the board meeting the board makes the final decision, and you would hear whether you were in the final recommendations or unable to be funded this cycle.
I
Thanks,
can add a
Gisela.
little more just to say, if you are funded and you have sort of this anxiety about programming kicking off because of the January 1 start date and needing to sort of ramp up to what that programming might be, the foundation tries to be a very good and strong and flexible partner with our grantees. And so once we are in a relationship, if programming timelines need to shift, et cetera, please know that we are responsive. And we don't want you to go into anxiety with the process because of our timelines of funding. We want to work with you for your programming to be successful.
Thanks, Marissa. So the next question is one that we spoke to earlier, so I'm happy to answer it. As a reminder, we're looking to award 12 to 15 grants this cycle. And we answered it earlier, so if you're looking for more details or context around that, then please do refer back to the materials in the recording. The next question is whether or not there's going to be some kind of scoring rubric for the application, or if it's more geared toward alignment or both.
Dana, you want to take that?
Sure, we have a scoring rubric that we use internally with our GAC, and we also work closely together as a team to review proposals in the most equitable way possible, so that everyone is scored along the same list of criteria. That said, we don't necessarily share that with applicants, but note that the grant guidelines are really the best thing to refer to and follow.
Thanks, Dana. The next question is about site visits. Are we able to share how many site visits we will do for each organization?
Sure. So the expectation is that we will meet with organizations who move to the site visit stage once. There may be the chance that we'll follow up if we have additional questions, either from ourselves or the participatory review committee, as we meet with each other to talk through applications and moving again to the next stage, but it would be just one site visit.
Thanks, Marissa. I'm going to return back to that question that was asked earlier, and we asked for a little bit more context. I'm just going to read the scenario directly to give you all a better understanding. So the organization already runs a 12-week curriculum via Zoom and face-to-face, and they're national, but they have numerous young people participating in New York City. They are totally volunteer and community funded. If given this grant, it'll be new for them. And their works surround social and emotional, cultivating sisterhood and increasing interpersonal and leadership skills that align, increasing interpersonal and leadership skills. And they're wondering if that is aligned with this fund. And specifically, they're looking for support in building. It sounds like base building as well, and going from only being community funded based on donations to being grant funded. And their curriculum runs about twice per year, and they have monthly meetup meetings.
Now you don't want to kick us off, and then maybe I can add.
Sure. Thank you for the explanation. It's really appreciated. And it sounds like there is alignment based on the grant guidelines. That said, of course, more details are needed, which is why we have that application. So we appreciate the opportunity to learn more about your work.
And again, I think I would just add that the clearer you are of just the work being done in New York City, and I think additionally, just the intentionality of sustaining that work in New York City would be helpful. For national organizations, sometimes it's like, well, we happen to just get participants from New York, but necessarily like doing outreach or that base building part isn't something that they can prioritize or have the capacity to do so at this moment. And so, you know, when it comes to the proposal review or even a site visit stage, that can be difficult for our GAC members to really like say, well, yes, we should prioritize this organization. But again, if you are clear as clear as possible in your application, and the alignment of the programming being intentionally, a New York City like hub, being a part of the work that you're doing, then I think it definitely aligns.
Thank you for that additional guidance. Now I'm going to move over to the chat. And so I'm going to ask for some patience and grace as I'm scrolling through questions that we got in the chat and some that we didn't quite catch. So if I miss your question, please do maybe put it in the Q&A, but wait until I'm finished reading to the chat. So this next question is about site visits again. And again, it looks like for organizations that are maybe operating out of schools, it looks like for this organization, the site visit might happen during school hours. So are they correct to assume that we as a foundation and our GAC members are not expecting to see any youth programs in process or necessarily talk to any of their program participants?
Yeah, I can start us off. We understand that school has specific hours, and we want to be as minimally disruptive as possible. And so we're looking forward to speaking with program leadership and know that there's time constraints based on our time constraints. So we look forward to working with organizations that move to the site visit to schedule what makes most sense for all parties involved.
Thanks, Dana. So there's an organization that is doing systems change work, but they're not solely focused on mental health or healthcare. Are they still eligible to apply?
I would say that in the grant guidelines, we do note that the systems issues related to mental health are pretty widespread and do impact emotional and social well-being. And so I think that we are taking a broad look at this and would welcome applications that make that linkage, even if the programming is not explicitly focused on one specific area. That said, please do make the connection to mental health, as that is a priority for phase 2.
And another good transition. This next question is also kind of about that alignment piece. So this person is asking whether or not we consider organizations supporting domestic violence survivors to be aligned with the mental health piece, especially because part of this person's work is support around psychological support for survivors. And then they ask as an example, so single mothers of 38 are outside of the scope.
I would say that work in related to domestic violence support in safety and healing justice is something that we would be very interested in learning more about. That said, we are looking at youth for this opportunity, and we are considering youth to be 12 to 25. With some exceptions, we know that that's not a perfect container, if you will. So I would consider that as your apply.
Thanks, Dana. So this next person is asking, what is the best way to indicate a time-sensitive matching funder?
So I can share that we have our specific touch points set where you'll hear from us. And that's again, August 15th, related to whether your organization will move to a site visit. Site visits take place in October. As Gisela noted, we're not really able to indicate during that period whether your site visit will lead ultimately to funding. And that December 11th date is when we anticipate sharing whether your organization is ultimately funded. We aren't able to move outside of that date any earlier because it aligns with our board meeting, who ultimately makes funding decisions aligned with the grant guidelines. If you move to the site visit stage and are at the point of waiting for a funding decision and there is a very tight deadline, check in. We want to be in dialogue. We want to understand individual considerations, but we won't be able to share a final funding decision before December 11th.
Thanks, Marissa. This question is, again, kind of looking for guidance on how to strategically, it sounds like, write some of the narrative of their proposal. So this organization runs a writing program on teens focused on building social and emotional learning, and they also publish those stories into curriculum and professional development for 6th to 12th grade young people, youth serving adults in New York City. So it sounds like there's both a piece that's working directly with young people, but also professional development piece for adults who work with young people. Would you recommend focusing on just the writing program for young people or on the training and curriculum piece for adults that support mental health in young people?
I can start us off, Dana. I think that it would be important to really speak very explicitly about the writing program, how it connects and is in alignment with the grant guidelines. I wouldn't necessarily dismiss talking about how that program is then informing something else that actually is developing professionals in the field, right? Because I think that speaks to a bit of the systems change work that we want to see as well. And so, it might not be the full chunk of your proposal really talking about that piece, but I would center, really describing the writing piece, the intentions around that, the goals and outcomes of it, and the impact you think you're making with the youth. And then also just complement the systems change piece with the curriculum.
Thank you for that context, Gisela. So this is the last question second to last question in the chat, and then I'll move back over to the Q&A section. So this is kind of a similarly aligned question around how to strategically kind of steer their proposal. So this organization is a community organization center focused on healing justice for queer and trans people of color, with 50% of their members and leadership being youth or youth focused. Are they still eligible to apply, or does it need to be 100% of programming is youth focused and 100% of participants are young people?
Yeah, I would say, again, we're really interested in programming that's by and for youth. And that said, if there are others that are focused on supporting that youth, it seems in alignment. So I would encourage an application to learn more.
And just to also remind folks that, if you believe it's better to just make the case and the alignment with a program specific designation, that's also a choice. But I would say, you can also be clear in the application for general operating that it is only 50% of your programming that focuses on youth. And then, it would be evaluated with the rest of the proposals.
The next question is kind of along that theme around how to strategically steer their application. So I'll read it out because I think the context will feel helpful for answering. This organization is based in Brownfield, Brooklyn, and they focus on trauma-impacted women and their families. They currently have an entrepreneurial program that is mindset-centered, so focused on strengthening the mindset that cultivates the entrepreneurial spirit and ultimately transformational life skills. Would they also be encouraged to apply? They're also transitioning from fiscal sponsorship to 501c3 consideration.
I can start on that second point around the transition from fiscal sponsor to 501c3. So that's not a problem if you do work towards applying in any organization that is fiscally sponsored or in the application process for a 501c3, not a problem. We ask for you to apply with your current status, just because we know that the process with the IRS can take time. It can be a bit winding. And so if you do ultimately move forward towards funding, we'll check in very closely and work with you to move funds as is possible at that time. And we hope that any organization that is fiscally sponsored that then moves to their own 501c3 has a strong relationship with their fiscal sponsor. And should you need to transfer a grant at any time, that's also something that we do. So please don't be concerned about your application status based on your 501c3 or being fiscally sponsored. That's something we'll work with you through, but please do apply with your current status.
And as it relates to the programming, I think you just have to really show the link in the application to the alignment of either, the systems change piece of this program that's, seems a little bit more on the economic justice piece, but how does it align to mental health and healing? So that's what I would say.
This next question is a good kind of transitional question. If and when organizations do become a part of the cohort of grantees, does the New York Women's Foundation provide opportunities and space for the cohort to collaborate around best practices and challenges, including other kinds of support from the foundation?
I can start. We do aim to bring folks together in a variety of different kinds of spaces. And one example is last year we brought the grantees that were in the fund together for a virtual conversation about what they saw as next, which is one of the reasons that we ended up thinking about mental health as something as critical to young people. And so we do offer those spaces. That said, the fund is not a specific cohort model, and so there's no requirements to be part of some sort of regularly meeting organization group, but we do try to provide that community and space for sharing of learnings and experiences.
Thanks, Dana. So we're starting to wrap up. We have a few more questions and then we will talk about next steps. So the next question is, can we speak a little bit more about how economic security fits into the guidelines of this opportunity?
Yes, so similarly, as we mentioned before, it's not one of the main priorities, but we understand that programs can be intersectional. So if you see the alignment of this particular program or this focus on economic justice and security that you have with mental health, then for sure we encourage that application to come in.
And can an organization based in Westchester County apply?
So our geographical focus is currently New York City. It is our New York City Fund in its second phase. If there is work that is being done in both places, that's when we sort of consider folks outside of that geographical scope. But if you are solely a program in Westchester, this would not be aligned for this time.
Thanks, Gisela. This question, again, I think speaks to they're looking for guidance around how to be strategic about their proposal. So this organization serves Black and Indigenous people of color, particularly girls that are significantly younger, so maybe 12 and a little bit younger than the specified outline that we gave. And that makes it challenging to prove youth involvement in the design of their programming work. And they specifically provide the bulk of their programming to children. It sounds like young girls ages 3 to 12. And they're concerned about alignment with the fund. And they don't do systems change work directly, but they empower young people to do that work and kind of plant those seeds early on. And so I guess they're asking how aligned that group would be with this opportunity.
I would say that though they are within, priority community, we want to elevate. I think the age group is just way too young for this particular fund opportunity. And I would just say, let's stay in touch around the work that you are doing, and maybe in a future opportunity, then we could discuss whether it fits within the fund or whether it is something that maybe other foundation strategies could align with.
We have 2 more questions. So for folks who have a hard stop at 11 a.m., please do again know that all of these materials and the recording will be sent out to you. The next question is, again, looking for some guidance. I'm going to read it directly for context. This is an art therapy organization that partners with other companies dealing with the arts for young people. And it sounds like that piece aligns with the focus of this opportunity. Will they be able to sponsor their partner company to apply as well as apply for the grant themselves? So can they apply and also sponsor their partner organization or collaborator to apply? Or would they have to merge both groups as in one proposal for the same kind of related work for this opportunity?
Marissa, so I think it's like this organization has their own status and then would be a fiscal sponsor to another organization who can apply, who would want to apply. Is that any conflict on that side?
Not a conflict. I might say it may go more towards the question of competitiveness of the cycle. If you're, and apologies if I'm not fully understanding, if the question is whether we should, if you're encouraged for both organizations to apply, you can, absolutely. But again, it's going to be very competitive. And so that may be a consideration to take into account, but technically speaking, both organizations are eligible in terms of status for applying, and we don't take a position either way. We trust the relationship that sponsored projects have with their fiscal sponsors in moving work forward. And so we would want to understand the relationship. We ask for the full terms of fiscal sponsorship agreements to understand what that relationship looks like, but we do not encourage one or the other.
And just on the programmatic side, both would have to make the case of alignment, strong alignment with the grant guidelines if they're applying separately. So yes, sort of like think through both. If one is only going to be explaining the partnership they have with the other, I think it's best to then think of what an inclusive of both areas, or like both partners, carrying out the work in one proposal versus 2 separate ones. That said, we wouldn't be funding, double the amount to be able to like support the work. It would still be an 80K grant.
Thank you for that additional context, Gisela. This is the last question, and then Marissa is going to put some contact information in case folks do have Flux-specific questions or looking for some more of that guidance in the chat, so that folks who are still in the room can follow up with us directly if your question wasn't answered, or if it was, but maybe we misinterpreted. So the next and last question is around, again, the kind of narrative of the proposal that they're thinking of applying with. And they're wondering if there's an opportunity for the young people at their organization to contribute directly into the narrative by submitting images or stories or other kinds of media.
Yeah, I think 2 things. First, the online application is really an opportunity to share narrative. And so there's space to include stories or whatever speaks to the work most clearly. And then, as Marissa indicated, there's space to upload other kinds of documents. And so if there's something that you want to share that doesn't fit within the narrative piece, please feel free to do so. And if you have any questions, Marissa just put her contact in the chat. Please feel free to reach out for any support specifically related to Flux.
Dana. So again, Marissa just put 2 pieces of contact information in the chat. So I do encourage you to take a screenshot or copy and paste if you can. If you have questions on the fund in general or grant guidelines, so similar to the one that we just got asked, then please contact Gisela, and there is her email address. And if you have kind of more technical questions around Flux or it gets sticky when you do start to apply, please don't hesitate to contact Marissa, whose contact information is also in the chat.
And it's also in our grant guidelines. So if you forget and haven't captured it, go to our website under grant making, and you'll see the grant guidelines uploaded there as well. Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone. Again, all of this information and the recording itself will be emailed to all of you after our session. Thank you all for joining us today.